And yeah, without any further delay, let me just do a quick introduction of today's speaker. So, uh, for today, we have Yatin Garg, who is working as the director of growth at this company called cashkaro.com. To speak a little bit about Yatin, so Yatin is currently working at Cashkaro, but before this, he was instrumental in the growth of Shuttle as he was a founding member for 6 long years. He was also a part of the core team at Jabong, which led Jabong's foray into international markets. I have personally been a big fan of Yatin, but it's our pleasure to have you today, Yatin. Welcome on the show.
Thank you so much, Ayush and Satej. It's a pleasure actually doing this for you. And of course, I'm sure this is going to be a learning experience for myself as well.
Perfect. So yeah, Yatin, you can take it away. People, please keep on shooting your questions as and when you have in the chat section. And again, I'll try to take as many questions as we can. Thank you. Take Yatin, over to you.
First of all, I would like to welcome each one of you. Thank you so much for showing up. And I will try to make it worth your time. Let me share my screen and then we are on. Ayush, please confirm if my screen is visible to you.
Yes, Yatin, we can see your screen.
Cool. So, to talk about retention. So, what exactly are we to do here, right? When we talk about retention, what's the idea? You would have heard about leaky buckets. So, how do you kind of fix what are some experience which I have seen? I would want to share, and to each whatever learnings you are able to pick up and that'd be wonderful. So just to build the context right? So like Satish did mention that I am looking for people in retention, and whenever we have posts jobs or Naukri or LinkedIn, so I see a lot of people who are applying are from acquisition backgrounds, right? And kind of like a certain kind of a feeling that people who are position are a lot in demand, a lot. So I am yet to come up with super talent. Uh, been there, and to be like process, I'm not claiming to be an expert here, but few lessons which I have kind of picked along the way. So let me just do a comparison between two companies where A focused on retention. That's why you're seeing 85% versus company B, flush with cash, is acquiring more than double. A is acquiring about people. Company B is about 10 people. Cost of signing user per month is exactly the same. So when you kind of run this, right, and is predictable. We know that because company B is acquiring 2 million people a month versus company A, which is at 1 million. So, of course, company B would have higher. When you fast forward that to 3 years, that becomes a story. So, right after the first year itself, the MAUs of company A take over company B by a significant margin. And looking at the cost of acquiring a customer and the revenue per customer, just sticking to the same kind of a metric, we see that company A actually earns $93 million more than company B in profit margins. So and to kind of corroborate this, I have an Excel sheet here which you guys can refer to. I'll probably take you through that also in a bit, but the maths is out there and it is very real. um, See, one crucial part about retention is that retention actually lifts all other boats. whether it is virality or it is improving your monetization or getting a competitive edge in acquisition, even accelerating the period in which I am going to make my acquisition cost back, basically the payback period, and then of course making money on that. So let me quickly share how this turns out when you look at it on Excel sheet. So look at virality, for example. Okay, so this is 12 months of data, where you have exactly the same number of users in scenario A and in scenario B. Scenario A, 25% retention, that's where the curve stabilizes. Scenario B, 35% of the retention. So you run these formulas and you realize that scenario A gives me 77,000 people who have come by a referral or virality means. In scenario B, it's 94,000 people. But this is just 1 month. When you do that at a cohort level and see it for 12 months, you will see that because of improvement in retention, this adds to about 120,000 people towards the end of the year. Similarly, you can actually check this maths for monetization and for payback period, and you would come back to the same conclusion. Okay, going back to my presentation. Okay, so what is the final objective we are chasing here? At the end of the day, we would want that whatever is the lifetime value of my customer, that should be more than the money I am pouring in to acquire that customer. Simply put, that is what we are chasing. Now, we can say that I would want the LTV of the customer, whatever money I earn from him, to be like whatever money I earn in the first month, that is better than my CAC. Now, those kind of variations are possible, but of course, mota level, LTV should be greater than CAC. What is the problem? So look at all the acquisition channels, whether it is Google or Facebook or PR or virality, whatever that leads to installs. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of keeping it limited to the app world. Same thing applies for other kind of business models also, but I'm just kind of running this example from that perspective. So installs, after that, nothing happens. From if installs convert to sign up, that's where the problem is. That's my onboarding is not fixed well. If onboarding happens well, then making the customer happy becomes a problem, and also building a habit loop so that the customer who was happy with me stays happy with me forever, that becomes challenging. And even if that solves, still that happy customer can churn out. So that's why if you look at the scope of this discussion, I would be limiting it to three areas primarily. One is onboarding. Second is keeping the engaged user more engaged. And then just in case churn happens, so what do we do about it, right? Uh, Guys, fact of the matter is it is hard, right? It needs like a lot of work to stop going things to dumpster. And that's why you would realize that at the end of the day there is no silver bullet, but yes, hundreds or probably thousands of lead bullets which would probably do the magic. And one of cases would be like your rockstar experiments which will just change your world. But it is about slogging in to do those small little incremental improvements, and over time these improvements compound and give you the better the results you're looking for. Okay, retention actually is an output, but the inputs are activation, engagement, and reactivation. The way to look at activation is that it's basically connecting the user to the core value proposition of your product. So experiencing that aha moment and experiencing that for several number of times, till a particular time period, that is what the job of activation is. Engagement is connecting that user to the value proposition over and over until and unless a habit is formed. And reactivation, of course, is just in case the habit breaks. How do you kind of reinstall that? So these three areas would be are core to this talk. Let's start with activation, right? So this, of course, is a very famous graphic being used by useronboard.com, There, you need to convey the value proposition to the customer very well, and the value proposition is basically which gives him the superpower. So how do we kind of do that, and how do we ensure that the customer has actually understood that? That's the job of a growth marketeer when he or she looks at activation as an area. So how do we fix activation, right? It's a four-step process, and usually this has been tried and tested several times in the trenches. One, of course, is to understand what was the intent of the user when he came to my platform, whether he downloaded the app, came to my website for the first time, took a trial of my SaaS software. It could be whatever area we are talking about, but understanding the intent. And the intent cannot be because I saw an ad, because at the end of the day, we all see hundreds of advertisements every day, but we don't connect with all. We don't basically go and try all those products. There is something which is, so there is certain job to be done which a customer has on his mind when he's trying your product. So getting that job to be done out becomes super crucial as a first step. Similarly, once we understand that these are the 2, 3, 4, 5 different kind of use cases which a person is trying to solve employing your service or product, the idea is to create very customized onboarding experiences for these users, trying to connect them to their goal. And I am emphasizing there because it is, at the end of the day, it is about the user, not about me. Therefore, idea is to connect the user and walk through them to reach their goal, not mine. Then how do we figure out our 7 friends in 10 days kind of a metric? Of course, you might have heard about it. This is a famous thing which Facebook or all the growth marketing studies keep talking about, which is Facebook led the users to reach 7 friends within 10 days, and the people who achieved that mark stayed with Facebook for long. So how do we find that metric in our business? And then fourth and final object is to basically remove obstacles from wherever we can. So let's just look at this one by one. Uh, but before even I go there, right, super important thing to understand is this. So this is basically a cohort of users which did something, which did a crucial action. Let's say if I talk about an e-commerce company, there the context would be the person who has placed the first transaction. When does the user place the second transaction? It could be transaction, it could be add to cart, it could be, say in case of Pinterest, pinning the content, it could be in case of Oyo booking a hotel night, it could be whatever, right? But whatever is the core action. So how a user is doing that core action over time. Now, this is where this comes to. Usually, in most cases, we will figure out that the sharpest decline in performing that core action happens on the first initial 1 or 2 days. What does that mean? That means something is off here on onboarding. And if we are able to do significant delta here, then you would see a cascading effect. That effect will continue. So the curve which goes flat later on, this curve can be lifted up, and that's what we are looking to achieve after fixing our retention in general. Now, before we go to the experiments and the areas in depth, there's a general rule which I want to certainly talk about, which is this particular formula. So this is not like a mathematical formula, but just an indicative heuristic to understand. So how do we fix conversion? And this conversion applied to a new user becomes activation, applied to an existing user becomes engagement or purchase, applied to a churned user becomes resurrection, right? So how do we fix that conversion regardless of the stage? It is basically saying solve for users motivation, that's M. B, clarity of the value proposition. C, what is the incentive I am giving to the user and what is the friction he is facing? So whatever is the friction, is my incentive big enough to take care of that friction. If we are able to do that, then user will move past friction and do what we want the user to do, right? And the last part is, of course, tackling anxiety. So any new user would have these kind of questions. Any existing user would have, certain concerns. So finding those anxieties and fixing those up. These values, which is 4, 3, 2, 2, are indicated saying that any conversion, the impact of motivation is going to be double than this part of the equation. So just an indicative formula. Basically, at the end of the day, we need to remember 5 things here. One is motivation, clarity of value proposition, incentives, friction, and anxiety. Okay. Now, from this lens, rest of the world would unfold. Okay. So let me talk about some experiments which we did with respect to onboarding. And what was the idea? The idea was that whenever user comes, how do we motivate the user and how do we clarify the value proposition? Traditionally, we have been doing this with simple push notifications, sending emails, etc. And while we keep doing that right now also, this was a different thing which we tried. So this was the notification which went out. So an important thing here to understand is basically that we connected the user with a human face rather than a faceless company. And that impact. So like, on separate note, we have seen doing this usually helps in better CTRs. Now, this notification actually led the user to Typeform. And I don't know if my screen is clear or not, but I am taking the same person um, here, and we did like, a series of GIFs with that. Let me kind of try and show you that as well. So this is a very quick onboarding exercise which we do with our new customers. It's playful. The idea is to kind of entertain the user while explaining the value proposition. Okay, so this is where a user would land. So how does it work? We basically convey what the thing is, also solving for the motivation, saying that I myself have earned XYZ amount, then answering the core value proposition question, like making that even clearer, is that whatever we do is over and above existing discounts, etc. So this content is actually coming from listening to our customer queries, especially the new user interviews, where we find that some people do get confused about it. So picking that up from those interviews and trying to address that upfront in onboarding. Then the next part, of course, is solving for the anxiety, which is saying that, hey, this is funded by Ratan Tata. We have associations with top of the notch websites, etc., etc. And there is no catch in this. So whatever are the moments of anxiety, the questions a user has in mind, the idea is to proactively identify them and address those. This basically leads a user to this, which is basically at the end of the day, we are saying that, hey, there is some sort of an exclusive thing which we are doing for you, which is a small reward for going through this onboarding process. Okay, now what this led to, okay, I'll just come to the results very quickly. So test versus control. This was a very small segment with which we kind of tested, but the numbers are statistically significant with a 100% confidence interval. Here we are talking about there's an uplift of about 32% in my activation rate. So kind of worked very well. Now, understanding user intention. So how do we do that? And this part is actually connected a bit to like the previous part also, where the idea was to talk to the user and understand what was the purpose he wanted to solve, right? So there are 4 types of customers which are like recommended to be spoken to. One is the set of users who signed up, they did not engage and just vanished. So the idea is to understand that what were they looking for, what was the expectation with which they came, and are these even the right people to talk to. Then of course, like we get into things like what channels they were acquired from, are those the right channels, etc., etc. So that is where like the benefits would unfold. Next bit is people who engaged a bit but they have not reached the goal yet. Like for example, people who added a product to the cart but did not do the final transaction. So trying to understand that, what are their questions, any queries they have, what is the central objective they want to achieve, and that insight comes in our marketing, communication, etc. Then people who have signed up recently and have achieved the goal. So people who just signed up and did the transaction, or people who came simply signed up for a subscription. So talking to those users to understand that what is it that kind of motivated them to complete their purchase. Another interesting question to understand from these users is that what almost prevented them from buying. See, the user has already crossed that limit. He has overcome the anxiety as well as the friction he had, and finally took that step. But the moment he has done that, that is the right kind of a time to get in touch with this user and try to really understand that, was there anything in the flow which was preventing them to kind of do this purchase or get converted. And that unlocks a lot of insights. Then people who did engagement with us, but then finally uninstalled. So what went wrong? Where did we kind of not meet their expectation? What else could have been done? So this actually provides a lot of insights. And I have been doing this for a long time. Seldom I have come across a time when I've spoken to a customer and have not uncovered a new insight. So this activity, while does not look extremely scalable, but it certainly helps, especially for the people who are working on the retention side. I think this becomes imperative. Yeah. So this is what it looks like before understanding what each user is trying to achieve. The idea is we try to make our goal pushed. But once you know what the person is looking for, this is how onboarding can look like. And that certainly helps. So user does recognize that, the onboarding exercise is actually helping them achieve their goal. And then the rewards show up in terms of their retention. Yeah. Okay. So coming to the next part, which is finding 7 friends in 10 days, that kind of a metric for you. So I'll not go into a lot of details. And of course, after this presentation, Ayush will share the recording as well as the presentation with you guys. So there is a very good answer available on Quora. There you would get the detailed process of how to kind of do that. But on a 10,000 feet kind of a level, basically look at the success metric. What is it that we are trying to achieve with the user? Then we need to see that, for all the users who actually did this success metric, what are the associated events? Like for example, in my case, a user comes to Cashkaro, selects a retailer on which they want to purchase and get redirected to that retailer. Now we see this, and this event is called exit, basically redirection from our portal to the my partner's portal. This process is called exit. So we see that, okay, people who exited, right? What was their behavior? How many exits they had done? Was there a particular channel from which these guys were acquired? Is there a particular kind of engagement they talk to? Were these guys opening my emails, etc., etc.? So whatever success parameters you think that these parameters might lead to success, we identify those and put those across, saying that, okay, people who did this converted, not converted, and then we figure out a correlation between them. So I'll not go in depth, of course, but you would find answer to your queries here in depth on this thread. Okay, moving on. So how do we remove obstacles? Here again, we are talking about 4 core principles. One is educating the user. And this education could happen through product walkthroughs, videos, tooltips, etc. Second part is how to entice the user, how to kind of tease your user to show the world after he finishes onboarding, right? And can that be served in chunks? And by that, I mean that, maybe do not give the entire thing away upfront, but kind of serve that as a motivation at different steps of onboarding. Like for a very simple example, like, of how we kind of do this is when we have to get a survey filled, right? There are certain questions where we do mention that, hey, only 1 minute left. Hey, last question, and you are about to unlock such a great thing. So that motivation at the right time helps the user to keep him in the flow. Third, and a super important part, is to reduce friction. Wherever we can reduce friction, you would see the results translated to conversion and retention immediately. Whether it is things like pre-filling certain forms, or limiting the number of choices to help user make the right kind of choice, or it could be like breaking the tasks in chunks, like I was talking about. Then last part is making the onboarding productive. So see, at the end of the day, retention would mean that we are changing somebody's habit. We are installing a new habit in place. So for that to happen, the idea here is, can I start giving certain dopamine hits at the time of onboarding itself? And by that, the idea is, can I give a certain reward to make user excited about the usage, and that experience upfront kind of stays and sticks along. So in case of shuttle, right, we used to give a free ride for users to try on. And let's say if somebody has not been able to actually even take the bus, then we would kind of give another one until and unless he has gone through my experience for free of cost. Like it is difficult to kind of install that habit in users mind. So how do we kind of make this onboarding productive? By giving those small rewards at the right time becomes an important framework to think about. All right. Another example of this reward structure, another experiment which we did, is basically how do we educate the user and how do we make this onboarding productive. So here the channel is of course in-app notifications served to the users who reach the homepage for the first time, and the idea is to kind of actually handhold them towards the rewards. So this is something which we kind of tried very recently, where the co-founder of my company basically takes the user step by step and walk him through towards getting the final reward. And this is how my results look like. So this blue bar is the set of people who actually went through this experience, and they converted at 13.3%, versus the green bar did not get this experience, and those converted at 19.15%. So we are talking about a 46% uplift in activation here. Okay, now coming to the engagement bit, right? So onboarding, then finally, of course, engagement. Here, how to think about engagement, right? So three core principles here as well. One, can we refine our current features? Can we make them easier to understand? Can we build repetition? And repetition, of course, is the key to certainly go towards habit forming. So how do we get more often in front of my customers, improving my current features? So that is one. Two, building certain retention hooks. Can I give him reasons to come back? And this is where all the triggers come in picture, whether this is notifications, emails, SMSs, etc. And third, and of course a long-term solution, is to fix the product quality itself. If the quality of the product, quality of the service is better, of course, the retention curve would flatten faster. Okay. So a quick example, right? The property which you are seeing on your screen right now, this is called a store page. And this talks about Amazon's offer. And we have another property, which again talks about Amazon, but in a slightly different format. So these properties do exist on Cash Karo even now. And the idea was to serve different purposes. However, when we were looking at our data, we understood that people who go to this property, they do the exit metric better. And what this led to is that our homepage now, the banner actually leads to these kind of properties rather than these kind of properties. And what is the result? So about 12.5% better conversion on this property versus the previous one. And mind you, here we have not done any product development. We had both these features, just showing them at the right places, got us this kind of an uplift. Okay, another important part is doing this hand holding of the user in a very proactive manner. So after a user has placed the first order, we send certain kind of nudges and emails where the idea is to address buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse is basically a certain kind of bad feeling after spending the money. A lot of people go through that. So how do you kind of address that, and how do you clarify whatever doubts a user would have at that time? So this again came from a lot of interviews. Those insights got translated into different kind of nudges like emails, etc. And this is response to one of those emails. So I made this presentation last night, and we exactly 14 days ago we got this, where the guy says that this would be probably my first time replying to a company out of the companies that have provided me a service of any kind, and that too in a positive manner. So lots of praises, and it actually becomes like a regular phenomenon. Okay, building retention hooks, right? And I would want to kind of draw your attention to this, coming from Vijay Ravindran, who is the director of Amazon Ordering Systems. So here the context is basically he's talking about Amazon Prime, and there is a fee for Amazon Prime, right? We all know. So here the idea is that the subscription fee was never about those $79. It was really about changing people's mentality so that they wouldn't shop anywhere else. So Amazon Prime being one of the most successful examples in building retention worldwide. In fact, the idea was that this kind of a program would break even in an year's time, but this did the trick within just 3 months itself. In fact, people who signed up for the first year, 95% of the people continued second year, 97% of the people continued third year. So what are those retention hooks for our business? That needs to be understood very, very well. Okay, before I actually go to this example, right? Now these retention hooks also come down to the channels via which we communicate with the users. The big challenge which we have amongst the two most popular communication channels, one is the push notifications, another one is emails. So push notifications delivery becomes a big problem, and there's an onslaught of push notifications. So you would see hundreds of notifications every day. So ignoring those becomes easy. And second part is email. So open rates in the emails aren't that great for all sorts of organizations. So how do we kind of deal with these retention hooks? There we did an experiment with a WhatsApp bot. We kind of coded this in-house. The idea was to overcome fatigue and then improve the response rate. Here, people who lapsed after initial activity, those were the people who were targeted. And the idea was that, can we kind of get the guy back by explaining the value proposition again and doing this in a fun conversational manner. Again, we kind of, initiated the flow via push notifications, in-app notifications, emails, etc. This is one of the examples of the notification I shared. So idea, again, I'm kind of applying the same principle using WhatsApp's logo rather than my own company's logo. It kind of improved my CTR a bit. This led to this. Okay, so you click on it, automatically WhatsApp opens, user sends a message, and then my automated flow starts. Here you would understand that it was meant for a certain kind of an audience. So the language is exactly done in a fun, playful manner, and so you got the idea, right? Now what did this result to? And this is massive. Okay, our reach changed from 40% in case of push notifications to 85%. So there's roughly a 90% improvement in that lift in the reach itself. Similarly, a conversion which was about 1.5% in other traditional channels, it jumped to 15%. Unfortunately, we had to shut this experiment down, because, like, we got a notice from WhatsApp saying that, hey, you are sending same kind of notice, like, notifications to users over and over again. And now we are kind of trying to do this in an official way. So this was a hack which we tried. We have seen the uplift, and now it is, like, in the next stage of development, doing this officially. All right. Now, coming to improving product quality, a very important observation, which is primarily come from experience, is doing small optimizations on fixing communications can take you so much, or to, like, it can just take you to a certain level only. But real needle movers actually come with, fixing product, improving product, right? So how to think about it, a small framework is, if the product is performing good and the change in product you feel you need is little, only then you optimize. Otherwise, if the product is good but you need a lot of changes, then redesign. If product is bad, you need changes, anyways you will redesign. If the product is bad and you need, very little changes, even then we redesign because the product is bad. So convincing the management, convincing, our leadership to basically get this part, to invest in the engineering in this kind of a way, it goes a very long way. So that's about it. um, you know like, there is one important part which is on getting the customers back. So I did not deliberately kind of include it here because, uh, if we do these parts right, then we would be able to retain the right kind of customers. And just in case there is a churn happening, the idea is again to see it from the lens of habit formation. There would be some sort of a drop which might have happened, because of which we have not been able to install that habit there in the first place. So you get that right, and then my, resurrection anyways get fixed. Another ways to fix resurrection are, of course, like, by funding offers and special promotions, etc. Yeah, guys, that's it. That's all I have for now.